critique is never easy.
Right.
You know, even when you want it, or even, you know, I can respond correctly so that you continue to give it to me. You know, when we say, well, somebody, you know, so-and-so really responds well, you know, when I challenge them or when I critique them, that's not because it's easy for them. You know what I mean? It's because their desire to get better is stronger than their insecurity.
Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. But before we get started, I just wanted to remind you that we actually, the book is out. It has been out. And if you haven't got your copy, I'd love for you to do that. You go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and I'm really excited because my heart from the days when I thought I was going to be a basketball coach was to help people reach their potential. And I think that this book can help you become whatever it is that God's created you to do, that act of significance, that purpose, that destiny. And so if you haven't got your copy, I want to encourage you to do that. And hey, you can help us out by clicking the, you want to give us a thumbs up. I want to give us a thumbs up. You can also give us a review on Amazon because the algorithm is king, and it makes a huge difference and helps us get the message out. Be sure and share our podcast. It's every Thursday at 8 o'clock, and today we have a very special guest. I have my middle son, our student pastor here at Potential Church, Mr. Carson Gramling.
What is going on? I'm excited to be here. I've never been on the podcast.
Wow.
Actually, that's not true. I was on the early one.
Yeah, early you and your beloved Jess.
Right, but you've had Tyler on like 4 or 5 times now.
Tyler has interviewed me. Did I tell you I have a book that's just recently come out?
Interesting.
Yes. Now, for those who don't know, your mom picked your first name, and I picked your second name.
Correct. My middle name is what it's also known as.
Right.
And you know, it's funny. I've had several people ask me, because you refuse to use my first name.
Oh.
You never call me Carson. You always call me, not even my middle name, which is what's weird. My middle name is Luke, but you call me Lucas all the time. And I've had people ask, like, what is Lucas? And I have to tell them that's you know, not my middle name, but it's kind of close. And that's what you always call me.
So I picked yours, which is Luke.
Yes.
Tyler, which is Holden.
Holden, what?
Did I?
Oh, man.
I picked Holden, and then Bailey, which is
Jade.
Mm-hmm. And then I got the help with the spelling of Bailey. You know, a lot of times spell it B-A-I-L-E-Y. Yeah, and then hers B-A-Y-L-E-E.
I like it. Way easier to spell that way.
Yes. Well, I'm not known for my ability to spell, so. Oh, anyways, other than Holden, that's a little harder name to.
I don't know why you went that direction.
You know what? I as I was saying that, I'm thinking I don't remember either. I don't. I have to think on that a little bit. That sounds like maybe Stephanie gave me a choice.
Maybe there's a famous in the Catcher in the Rye. The main character's name is Holden, but that's the first name.
And there's an actor, something Holden. An old guy. I can't remember. Anyways, we're not here to talk about middle names. Before we move on from middle names, so tell me your wife's full name.
It is Jessica Fajeda Isabella Kotu, I think. Something like that.
And then what you forgot?
Gramling. So wait, Kotu, is that part of it?
I think so.
Jessica Gramling is what she is her name. That is her name.
But she has a rather long.
She does. It's ridiculous.
And I'm sure it all has important to me.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But anyways, you're here today because a few weeks ago I talked about criticism, and I talked about on one side we're the critic, and on the other side we're often the person who is criticized. We all have to wrestle really with both of those.
Yeah.
And so I thought today maybe we talk a little bit about that. Maybe as you experience that teaching, there's something that came to your mind or something that you thought about along the way.
Yes, absolutely. So what I thought was interesting is, you know, anytime you see there's two dynamics, right? There's, you know, some people are this, some people are that. And I think we think about it that way. We think of ourselves as typically the victim being the criticized. And we think all the people against us are the critics. I think that if you were to ask people, I think, a room of people, how many of you have been criticized? I think everyone would raise their hands. How many of you are the critic? I think that'd be a small number. I don't think we necessarily see ourselves as the critic, but in reality, we're guilty of both. You know what I mean? I think it's so often we find ourselves in that position where we are criticizing something, but because we know ourselves, we assume the intentions are different, or we're just messing around. We don't mean it. And so we don't really count it as criticism, when in fact, people are probably receiving it that way. Yeah. And so it's one of those interesting dynamics. You know what I mean? It's like when you talk about hard work, there's a lot of people like, yeah, man, if I get these lazy people out of here, I really get after it. And I think criticism is that same way. We often struggle to see ourselves as that critic.
Yeah, I got a lot of good response, from that teaching, but most of it, well, not most of it, all of it was because people felt criticized.
Right.
Nobody came up and said, thank you. I know I tend to be a critical person.
Right.
Most people see, like you said, we experience criticism. We're not exactly sure what to do with it or how to handle it. And we always feel that our criticism of whatever has a reason.
Right.
It's legitimate. Right. It's not just my insecurity. It's not just my anger. It's you screwed up and you deserve to be criticized. And you're going in the wrong direction and you deserve to be criticized.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think that oftentimes for me, but I think the same goes for a lot of people, we do things without really analyzing why we do them. And I think, again, it's just easy to fall into that boat. Really, what we're doing is criticizing people. You know what I mean? I mean, whether it's politically, you do not have to look far to see criticism.
Right.
And I'm sure we've all given critiques of what we think of one side or the other. And yet, for some reason, we don't see ourselves as a critic. Whether we think it's justified, as if criticism is only, if it's justified, that it's not criticism. Or we think that it's not criticism, that it's just us giving our opinion, whatever we may think. It's easy to justify in a lot of different ways.
Well, you hear a lot about cancel culture.
There we go.
And I think a lot of times the reason that we tend to be critical is because it makes us feel better about ourselves, right? If I'm critical, when I see something in you that's not what it needs to be, and normally what I'm going to see in you that needs to be worked on is an area that often I
might not struggle with.
Right.
You know what I mean? In the sense, and I guess it kind of works both ways, because a lot of times you also hear that we see in others what we struggle with.
Right.
And so sometimes we're critical of that as well. So I think there's maybe both of those extremes.
Absolutely.
Where if I'm aware of it, it tends to be something I don't struggle with. You know what I mean? So I criticize you so as to make myself feel better. Where maybe when I'm not aware of it, I'm criticizing what I struggle with myself.
Yeah.
Because I don't like it in me and I see it in you, and
right.
And I call it out.
Absolutely. And I think, when it comes to criticizing people, it's a really delicate balance between positive and negative criticism. I think it's a really fine line, because you can't always base it off the person, right? Because what I might find as negative, you might have meant as positive. Mm-hmm. So it's a delicate balance, because you can't always play off the person, because we all know those people that, whether positive or negative, they're not fans of receiving criticism. Mm-hmm. We all often are those people. And so I think one of the hardest things can be learning how to give criticism, how to give critique. Maybe even criticism is not the right word for that. But I think that can be the challenge, is learning, how do I give input without being a critic, without being cynical, without always being on the negative side. And I think that can be a challenging balance.
Yeah, you got to, and I think one of the things I've learned from not only my own experience, but even your mother, Stephanie, my wife, is really good at not only reading the room. A lot of times, again, even if we're going to be critique, if I'm doing it to help you, often it's still, I'm motivated out of my own desire. In other words, I
Right.
want you to get better, but I'm also frustrated, or I want you to get better because I need to get a project done, as opposed to I want you to get better because I want you to get better. In other words, I
Right.
start with you in mind. And I think because when we do that, we read, first of all, just the environment. Is this a good time to talk to Carson about something that, I think he can do better in, or that he's struggling in? And it's not always a good time. You may be dealing with some other things. There may be things going around in the environment or the culture. And so it's important to kind of ask myself, is this a good time,
Right.
in the environment, and also in what's going on in your life? Are you tired? Did you just get done teaching? Did you just come off a victory, or did you just come off, what to you might feel like a failure,
Right.
And then I think also one of the things, at different times in our lives, we handle criticism differently.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when, especially when we're young, and there's always insecurity comes with you. It comes with all of life. We're all insecure, but especially comes when we're young, because we want to live up to something. We want to succeed, or we want to live up to the job that we've been given. So we want to hear good job. We want to hear
Right.
you did good. You hit a home run, all those kind of things. And sometimes if we don't think through that, our critique, we're speaking into insecurity. And as a result, people then we're going to want to defend. That's a natural response. If I speak into an area in which you're insecure, your first reaction is going to be to defend. And if you're young and haven't had a lot of opportunity, whether you're an athlete or a minister or in a business or even in a family, I think it's important to think through all of those things so as to give critique that is actually heard. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, it's about whoever we're giving critique to actually getting better.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, you brought up insecurity, and for me, that plays a big role when being criticized and when critiquing. Like you said, when it comes to that insecurity, it can cause you to push back on that critique. I think it can also maybe sometimes cause us to critique, right? Like if I'm insecure in my ability to speak, and then there's someone else who's speaking well, that insecurity can start building up where I'm starting to look for things to critique now. I'm starting to look for how can I bring them down a notch, because I don't like the way it makes me feel about me. And, that can be a challenging deal, and that can make it tough for the person to know what to listen to and what to not listen to, because, certain critiques can come out of that insecurity, of someone feeling like, man, I don't want them to go too high. I don't want them, I think we don't care about how well people do until it approaches us, until all of a sudden it seems like maybe they're going to surpass us. They're going to, lead more people. They're going to make more money. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, let me remind them of that they're not past me. And that's where those, that negative criticism, where really you're just trying to tear someone down, can start building through that insecurity.
Yeah, and you see a lot of money. I remember, especially in, in churches, normally you have committees that determine salaries and all that kind of thing. And normally everybody's kind of okay as long as whoever we're talking about, the pastor, whoever it is making less than the people on the committee.
Exactly.
But if the church grows and it expands beyond what the people on the committee are leading, that's where all of a sudden you run into trouble.
Right.
And like you said, in life, it's very easy to be okay with other people's success as long as it's a little bit less than yours.
Absolutely. Well, you had said earlier, I'm a youth and young adults pastor. And so majority of my job is to speak. And, we'll have different, whether it be, volunteers or staff members who start to, get an interest in that same area, that same field. And so they'll start speaking. And it's interesting because the heart is totally to help them until they get good. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I got to remind you, hey, you missed this. You didn't do that. And you can hear it because the tone changes. It's no longer about what you described earlier of, I want you to get better. It starts to become, I just want to remind you, you're not better than me. And I think you can just kind of tell that tone. And for me, that's always one of those keys of, do I need to
is this something I need to receive as the person maybe being criticized? Do I need to receive this or do I not? You can kind of tell when there's no desire in there for it to better you. And, it's really just to tear you down. And it's like, you know what, maybe this isn't something I need to hold too tightly to.
Yeah, I think honesty, when we talk about, I guess, giving critique, that if you're going to give me feedback is another word. We keep using the word critique, but we're just talking about feedback versus criticism, right? There's online, there's a ton of criticism. You didn't teach this right. You didn't do this, everybody is a critic, right? On sports, LeBron James, how many people know half of what LeBron James or somebody else knows in basketball, but we all think that we do, or politics, all of those kind of things. So I think it's real easy to become a critic, but I think feedback is incredibly helpful when it comes to people going to the next level, and that's where honesty probably plays a role. Because if somebody's always telling you do a good job, then that feedback no longer is helpful.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to be encouraged, but encouragement means more if the person that's saying it actually believes it.
Right.
It's kind of like if I say, you're a great singer, but I never ask you to sing.
Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like, man, that's a great book. I love, but they never do anything with it. You're like, well, do you really think it's a great book? Or did you, if you're not recommending it to anybody, if you're not spreading the word, do you really think that it's good, or do you just want me to feel good? Which is not a bad thing, but it just loses its power.
Right.
For encouragement and feedback, critique, whatever word you want to use, for it to really have power, to me, and I don't know if everybody's wired the same way, but to me, it's important that it's spoken from somebody who is honest. And that doesn't mean that they have to give me negative feedback, right? Because some folks aren't in a relationship where they can give you negative feedback, right? They're just not close enough. I mean, they can, I guess, but it's not. But what it does mean is that they don't tell me I did good when I know I didn't do good.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
They might pick out something that I did well. It's like when you were athletics, right? When you play a good game. And if I missed every shot, it's okay. Make sure that if you're going to tell me I did well, tell me I hustled. Tell me I played good defense or I rebounded well. But don't tell me I had a good game, because I know I didn't.
Yeah.
And then therefore, in the future, now when you really want to encourage me, I'm doubting.
Right.
Did I really do that well? And I think as a parent, as a pastor, as a leader in any environment, that's really important to be honest throughout, so that our feedback is meaningful and can really help people.
Yeah. No, and we've been talking a lot about the critiquing. I tend to naturally fall that way. For me, I think that my tendency, and I would assume most people, is anytime you talk about a topic, we tend to think, if it's in a negative light, we tend to think that's being done to us rather than we're doing it to others. If you talk about selfishness, it's easy to fall on the side of, no one thinks about me because everyone's selfish. If you talk about, hard work, again, to go back to that, everyone's going to think, yeah, man, if I just had more people who could work as hard as I am. So I tend to try and go the opposite way of, we do this, but there is the very real, or I guess there is the reality of dealing with criticism, of being someone who is being, like you said, like just criticized, where there's really nothing to take away from it. It's just people tearing you down. And I think that's a challenging one. And it's numerous times have been told by people how they're not bothered by what people think about them. And I've just never seen it be true. If you were to think about in politics, the debates, right? They're always in response to their critics. You know what I mean? It's never just for the people who are with them. It's always in response to their critics. If you think about sports, a post-game interview or whatever it may be, it's in response to the critics always. And I think that we always tend to, say, oh, I'm not bothered by what people think of me. And yet every response we give is to the person who's critical of what we do. And so it affects us so much more than I think we realize.
I just saw an interview. I don't know when people are watching or listening to this, but I just saw an interview of LeBron James, and he was talking about his son, Bronny, because there's a lot of criticism now. Should he get drafted? What about the contract? All of those things. And he was saying how when he first came into the league, he was impacted by the critics, by what people said. But he said Bronny is not at all. And I think that Bronny has probably learned, because he's grown up in it, how to deal with it more effectively. But I don't think anybody who cares about what they do cannot be impacted by, maybe not by all the critics, because if I don't respect you, maybe it still bothers me, but it's not going to impact me the same way as other people who have negative things to say, or the platform in which they say it, and how many people are actually listening to it. If somebody who's got 15 followers is ripping on Bronny James, I'm sure it doesn't matter to him. But if it's somebody with 15 million followers, and then there's thousands of people that are agreeing with it, I don't think there's any way that can't impact you if you're aware of that criticism. So I think it's important that we have to honestly realize there's going to be an impact, not only to us, but to the people around us.
Yeah.
Because like LeBron said, he didn't address it, but I wonder how much the criticism of his son Bronny impacts him.
Oh, you got to imagine quite a bit. I mean, when someone says that it doesn't affect them, I always think, well, maybe it's not very personal for you then. But when you love something, like the way LeBron loves basketball, or Bronny loves basketball, or the way we love what we do, there's no way for it to not cause some emotion when someone talks, because it doesn't feel like it's just something I do. It feels personal, and you can feel the difference when it's just something you do, right? Like, if you're not too interested in your handwriting and people critique that, it doesn't really hurt because it's not personal. You know what I mean? I am not a detailed person. So when I'm criticized for forgetting details, it doesn't hurt me because it's not personal to me. But teaching is, leadership is. And so when people critique that, it has to be dealt with. I'm not saying by this, I don't mean that everyone lets it control their life. I just think we sometimes act as if it's not even something to be dealt with, when in reality that hurts, even if you don't know the person. You know what I mean? When it's personal, if someone's going to critique my relationship with Jess, that's personal to me. So that's not easy to deal with. And so I think trying to learn how to deal with that criticism, again, especially when it's not beneficial to you, it's just trying to tear you down, is really tricky to learn with. And in the same way you talked about timing, I think for us, we have to know our own timing. You know what I mean? Like, there's times when I can look at the comments. There's times when I shouldn't. You know what I mean? When things are when things are challenging and not going as well as I'd like, that's not the time to, hey, what do y'all think about the teaching this weekend? You know what I mean? Maybe it's like, let me work through some insecurities before I hear that, because it can really take you to a spiral. Just take you down a spiral where it can be hard to come back from.
Well, sometimes even our families, we don't realize that. Like, you guys are getting ready to have a baby in a few months.
Yes.
And it's your first child. And I know as an in-law, right, as your father, but Jess in-law, right,
Yeah.
all those names, in-law, right, there's some insecurity with being a first-time parent.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not as likely maybe as the mother to speak, as Steph to speak in, but, those things are important. And if you don't think through those things, you can cause harm without realizing it.
Absolutely.
Because in your mind, you might think, look, I'm not being critical at all. I'm wanting to help you. But because it's the first time, you don't, like you're saying, there's going to be more sensitivity around that. So your response is going to be different. Like, one of the things we were talking about Bronny, well, one of the things that everybody has been positive about is, well, he's earned this how? Through his hard work. Hasn't been a lot about his ability to play. It's about his hard work and his ability to develop. Well, I'm sure then, therefore, if someone were to criticize him as being lazy, you know what I mean, then that would probably feel different than somebody criticizing the fact that his dad, made a difference, or nepotism, or whatever the, criticism might be. So I think that's really true, that we have to think through what is personal, and realize that not only does it, like I said, not only does it impact us, but it impacts the people around us. Like, if somebody criticizes me, then that's going to impact you, right? And as the pastor, that's going to impact the folks who are on the team, and impact the congregation. If they're reading it or something they're going to see, if it's a public criticism of some kind. And again, I think it's important to lead through those things as opposed to just let them happen and think, hey, they don't impact me, I don't care. It's like, no, I need to think through this so that I can journey through it in a way that is effective not only for me, but for my wife and for my kids and for my business and for my church and for, all the things that somebody's leading through. So it doesn't overwhelm just me, but other people as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're like, as my son, if you're criticized, not only does it impact you, but it's going to impact me.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you know what does impact you the most, like what those things that are going to hurt, the things that are personal, it makes you better at giving feedback because it makes you more aware of how people are most likely to receive it. For me, I know that when someone gets on stage to do anything, sing, act, communicate, whatever it may be, that's a personal act because it's you on stage doing something. And so I think that's a hard thing to bring feedback to because it is so personal. It doesn't feel like I'm just talking about something you've done. It feels like I'm talking about you as an individual. And so for me, knowing that as a communicator, knowing how that affects me allows me to be, I believe, more effective at giving that feedback to others. So, if someone communicates and they're looking for feedback, someone more early on, then oftentimes I'll look for, okay, what are at most 3 things that they can improve on? Because to go more beyond 3, they're not going to remember, to be honest with you. Everything doesn't have to be fixed in that moment. There's a length to this. I've talked a lot about it with my wife, Jess, that not everything has to be brought up in every moment. There are certain things that, hey, this needs to be changed, but we can wait on this. We can talk about this later. We can have, time to work on that later. And I'll always try and have a part where, hey, but this is what you did well. And if there's nothing to find that they did well, then I think it deserves a deeper dive. Either something deeper is going on with them or something deeper is going on with me. If I can't find a single thing, then either I put them in the wrong role. This isn't something maybe that's worth pursuing. Maybe there's something deeper going on there, or maybe there's insecurity in me that I didn't realize. Because if I can't find a single thing that they did well, then maybe there's some insecurity that I'm struggling to admit what they've done well.
One of the things that has helped me is that if you determine early enough who you're going to listen to, then you don't have to listen to everybody.
Yeah.
Some people they want to know if their name, on Google is mentioned or if on YouTube, if it's mentioned. And I've never done any of those things because I've dealt with criticism. I played basketball and the team was good and I had success. So there's always criticism amongst athletes. Right. And then in ministry, it really doesn't even matter how large a ministry somebody leads. Anytime you lead anything, you're going to be criticized. Yeah. I took care of the softball fields in our little town of Paragould, Arkansas years ago, and you didn't do it right. So I decided early on I was going to listen to those who love me, I was going to listen to those who believe in me, and I was going to listen to those who know more than me. And that way I know I'm getting the feedback I need to improve. And I want to hold, I intentionally invite feedback after the teachings. I invite our team to give feedback and try to create an environment where they can give that feedback of the direction we're going or what we need to improve on. That way, I don't feel that if I don't pay attention to all the comments or if I don't pay attention to every time, my name is mentioned on Google, I'm missing an opportunity to grow. Because if you because the thing is, if you try to listen to everybody, you're eventually going to listen to nobody because you just can't handle it. And if you don't listen to anybody, then you're not going to become your best. You're not going to grow because some criticism actually has value, in the sense that it shows us our blind spots.
Yeah.
I need people to help me in the areas that I don't see very well. Like I can't see behind me, but you can. And if you see something, it may in the moment even feel critical to me. But even if your heart's not right in what you're sharing, if it's revealing something about me that I don't know, it can help me get better. And so I think it's important early on to determine who it is you're going to listen to and how you're going to get feedback and what environments are you going to create. And then you have to work really hard because feedback, you know, critique is never easy.
Right.
You know, even when you want it, or even, you know, I can respond correctly so that you continue to give it to me. You know, when we say, well, somebody, you know, so-and-so really responds well, you know, when I challenge them or when I critique them,
Yeah.
that's not because it's easy for them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's because their desire to get better is stronger than their insecurity.
Right. So I've got a question on that. When it comes to who you're going to listen to, you know, it kind of becomes a challenge once you've listened. Now, what are you going to do? Right? Like when it comes to how do I respond to criticism? Because, you know, we can listen to a lot of people, but then we still have to make the decision. Are we going to do that? Now, when it comes to small things, it's just easier to trust that they know, like you said, they know more than me. I'm just going to do it even if I don't see it. But when it comes to life-altering decisions, like I would imagine when you and mom decided to move to South Florida, there was probably people who loved you, knew more than you, and believed in you, who told you that that was not the wise decision. You know what I mean? I'm sure there are people who fit into that category, but yet told you that wasn't the right decision. And so I almost, you know, like how do you then process the criticism you've received to then decide what you need to do in response to that?
I think anytime it comes from a group that you've invited into your life,
Yeah.
then you want to reconsider. And that doesn't mean that you're going to change your mind, but you want to you don't want to just put your head down and keep going. So
Right.
you want to ask yourself, am I going in the right direction? Let me make a list again of the pros and the cons and kind of walk through those. The other thing I think that's important is to ask yourself, do they understand what I'm trying to do? You know what I mean? Like if I'm going right, that's what I really want to do is go right. And they're giving me criticism, but they don't understand I'm trying to go right, then their criticism may not be wrong. It's just not really helpful. So a lot of times when I invite folks to give me feedback on the teaching, and they may give me feedback on a point, and as long as they understand what I was trying to accomplish with that point, then their feedback is incredibly helpful. But if they misunderstand what I'm trying to do, then it's not as helpful. So if
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide and determine what I'm going to do as opposed to what I'm not going to do, I think you want to, if it's from someone you've invited into your life or someone you respect, then you want to step back and say, okay, let me walk back through this. Let me think back through this. Nothing wrong with that, you know, to think back through that. But then I also think you're asking the question, do they understand why I want, you know, in like the case you brought up, do they understand why we're moving there?
Yeah.
What our motivation is. Do they think it's just for opportunity, or do they think it's just for adventure, or do they think it's just for money, or what do they understand what we're trying to accomplish by going there?
Yeah.
Because if they do, then their criticism carries greater weight.
Right.
And if they don't, then it's like, thank you. You know what I mean? But it doesn't carry as much weight because it's a different purpose, a different reason in which I'm going after.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also helps you see the people that you can trust with criticism based on the way they respond if you don't take that critique. You know, if they're able to receive that and sounds good and, you know, still move forward, then you know that's someone that you can trust with critique. But the moment you don't align with, you know, the criticism or the critique or feedback, like you said, that you know, they've given, the moment you know, hear that and still go the opposite way and they can't handle that, then it kind of gives the alarm of, okay, maybe this isn't someone I need to trust with, you know,
yeah, a lot of times people are like, you know, nobody listens. You don't listen. Nobody listens to me. And you're like, well, no, I heard what you said. I just didn't agree with it.
Exactly.
Right? I can hear you without agreeing with you.
Exactly.
And I think on both sides of that, we have to be willing to receive that.
Yep.
Hey, I gave, and especially as parents and kids get older, right? You got to be able to give whatever feedback you want to give, but allow the freedom of them to make their own decisions and not assume they didn't hear what you were saying just because they didn't take your advice. And then in the same way, you know, when you're receiving the advice, I think that's good. Well, thanks, brother Carson. Thank you for hanging out with me today and talking about something everybody deals with on both sides of it. And I'm sure you guys do as well. And I just want to remind you that in life, when you find yourself critiqued or criticized, it's really easy to get hard-hearted, to get, you know, thick-skinned. And we talk about those things sometimes as they're positive, but you know, if you really want to embrace life, if you want to love people, if you want to have close relationships, you have to have a soft heart. And so that means we have to effectively deal with criticism. So I encourage you, determine today, begin to work through who do you want to invite into your life to give you feedback that might help you see something that you just don't see, so that you can exclude those who are not part of those environments or part of that group, and yet and can have confidence that you're getting feedback, you're getting critique to what you're doing, whether it be as a first-time parent, whether it be in a marriage, or whether it be in a business or in a church. It's incredibly, incredibly important to know how we deal with criticism, because we're all going to receive it and we're all going to be tempted to do it. Don't forget, the book is out, and if you've not picked up a copy, we talk about criticism in here as well because it's part of the journey. And you can get yours today, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Walmart, Target, wherever you get books. And if you would, leave a review. It really does make a difference. Share this podcast, click the bell so that you'll know anytime we're online. We do a live stream every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. We have a little fun. We talk about some important issues. We play some games. It's just an opportunity for us to hang out and build community there in the chat. And Carson helps us out with that, as well as many other folks. We have a studio audience. Love for you to come and be a part of that if you're in the South Florida area. And we'll see you next time. Every Thursday, right here at 8 a.m., we drop a new podcast. Thanks for being here. Have a good day.